Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us the Chairman of Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, Mr. Pramod Deo, who will tell us and explain to us in greater detail as to what exactly happened when the central grid collapsed in large parts of India and about 600 million people were plunged into darkness. A whole lot of issues have emerged from that episode. A lot of learning is also happening. So today we'll speak to him and find out how have things changed since then. Welcome to our show, Mr. Pramod Deo. I would like to begin with a very simple question. I would want you to explain to our viewers as to exactly what happened when the northern and eastern parts of the country suffered because of the grid collapse. How did some states overdraw? What is the mechanism which states have to follow when they draw power? So, if you can just sort of give our common viewers an idea as to what happened.
See, what happens in electricity, because people are familiar with their DG sets. If you are living in Gurgaon, you know what happens, and immediately the DG sets comes and supplies power to all those condominiums and the commercial complexes that have been built. So that is a very localized thing. Otherwise, you are drawing power from the network, which is what we call as the grid. Historically, what has happened is that in India, we had that old Act of 1910, and where the concept was that supply of electricity. There was no such thing like generation, transmission, distribution.
Sure.
So what was happening is in the cities and towns, there was somebody who was set up a power plant, and he was supplying to that city or rural area. There was no question of any rural area being connected. So that was a simple question. There was no such thing like a grid or anything. Then in the 1948, we brought in the Electricity Supply Act, and we created electricity boards. And the whole idea was that develop a network for each state so that electricity can be taken to rural areas, far-flung places.
So, you think pre-1948 was localized?
Localized.
And there was no need for a network?
Network. It was licensees and they were supplying. That's why historically you have Mumbai, Tata supplying, and BSES, Calcutta. And then this whole idea started, electricity boards became the vertically integrated monopoly. And that concept came of generation, transmission and distribution. And they were building what was like the state grids. These were the regional grids only. When actually regional is used in a sense generic. Actually they were really the state grids. But then later on, many states did not have capacity to build up their own generating plant. So in the 70s, under this Electricity Supply Act, amendment was made, and it was decided that NTPC-like entities will be created, who would supply to more than one state. And that's how the regional grid concept came. So we have got now western region, northern region, northeastern region.
So north could supply to west or west?
But no, in fact that came later. Earlier what was happening is
National Power Grid.
National Power Grid. Otherwise what was happening was that we had NTPC. They were building these transmission lines because it was not exactly a watertight compartment where you said only this region, but they were mainly the regional power station. So that's how the power grid came. And now this power grid has become really a huge grid, because what we call as the new grid. Why we called it as new grid? Because we are not still connected to the southern region through what they call as a synchronous mode. So because synchronous mode, as the name suggests, it has to be synchronous. Actually, now important thing in electricity is there has to be matching whatever is being generated. It has to be drawn and utilized at the same level.
Same level.
That is what you call as the scheduling. That's why scheduling becomes necessary. So suppose you had one generator, and if you are generating 200 megawatt, then who is going to use that electricity will be using 200 megawatt.
So there will be 4 or 5 entities across regions that will be using this 200. So you have to schedule it, you have to distribute it in an orderly way. That's what you're saying, right?
And every 15 minutes, the scheduling is done.
Every 15 minutes?
15 minutes. Actually, the electricity is generated and used is really in a real time.
In real time, yeah.
But what you can do is you have to have this 15-minute scheduling.
Okay.
And that's why you have a state load dispatch.
So what happened that day? So now
what happened is that now there is that whole inquiry committee report has been given. We had also asked for a report because grid code is our responsibility. So we deal with the interstate. Anything interstate falls within the purview of jurisdiction. Anything intrastate is with the state.
Okay.
So that day apparently what has happened is that some of the transmission lines were taken up for maintenance. So there was a limited capacity. And now there is a never exact matching of what you generate, what you use. So there will be
a communication gap between how much was to be dispatched.
No. In fact, it is more complicated. If it was that simple, since I started explaining from ABC, I just take 2 minutes. So what happens there is that there will be always some kind of a overdraw or underdraw.
Okay.
Now, how do you really prevent it? In a developed country, you will find that if it is a 50 hertz frequency, everything has to be only at 50 hertz. There is no scope for deviation. But in Indian condition, because we have a shortage of electricity, there is always kind of overdraw given that. So to give a commercial signal, we have what we call as the unscheduled interchange. If there is an unscheduled interchange takes place, anybody who overdraws has to pay higher price.
So explain in simple terms, if you limit the frequency bandwidth, you make the traffic smoother. And it's like a smooth traffic, right?
But now, unfortunately, North has been facing shortages, and North also the financial health of the distribution companies being poor. So you have to buy in the market because we have created a big market today. Because now with the private sector coming, and we also had 2 power exchanges. So today in India, nearly 10% electricity is in the short-term market. There are no long-term PPAs. So those short-term, which means really 50,000, that $4 billion is the market. And $4 billion, if you were to concept, is something like 22,000, no, in a year, 22,000 crore is a market, short-term market of 7 or 8%, and nearly 3% in addition is in that UI market. UI is not a market, but people tend to use it like a market. So that night, what must have happened is that there was the excess supply available in western region. Frequency looked fine within that range. So they must have been supplying. And North obviously had this shortage, so they were overdrawing, but then they were overdrawing within limit. So when these messages must have been sent, so obviously the important thing is, this is one of the parameters is frequency, but there are other parameters. Because there is a limit to which electricity could flow from one region to other region. So all those signals, messages, this is what all the inquiry committee and report will deal. So it is not only the frequency, and that's why I maintain this frequency can give a very wrong signal. No?
Can we, we'll take a small break at this moment. Please don't go away and keep watching Rajya Sabha television. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We were having a conversation with the chairman of Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, Mr. Pramod Deo. Mr. Deo, you had come to a very interesting point where you said that there are several factors which could have led to the big grid collapse that happened. You said frequency may not be the only reason. Now, you suggested that on that day, the northern region was in deficit, so it was drawing more from the surplus western region. Now, after that, what happened?
After that, since the inter-transfer capacity was limited, there must have been a strain on your lines. and once the line starts tripping,
Okay.
so what will happen is that the generators also have a mechanism to protect themselves.
Okay.
So what will happen is your power generator, power station start going off the grid, and once that happens, it is like a cascading effect.
In simple terms, are you suggesting that in layman's terms, at that moment the traffic volume became much more than what the capacity of the lines could take?
There has been instances where the states have been overdrawing,
Okay.
and overdrawing because we have made the penalty very stiff for overdrawing. But actually basically penalty means that the Supreme Court has observed. It is not a tariff, it is only gives a commercial signal.
Commercial signal.
That is, if the frequency is dropping and you overdraw, then for each unit you may have to pay something like 17 or 18 rupees.
Oh, okay.
But you don't have to pay that money immediately. Because if you want,
states are not bothered about it. They are drawing for now, thinking
and
that
then
they
say
pay later.
they can pay later. Then some of the states have gone to High Court and got a stay. So our new regulations are not being implemented in the state. They pay at the old rate.
Okay, so there's a whole legal battle also around this.
Yes, because this is when
issue.
we talk about the center state.
Okay.
A very good example is Tamil
Which are the
Nadu.
states which have gone to court? Tamil Nadu has gone to court, is it?
Tamil Nadu is the last, and which has created a real problem. When we
And which other states have gone to court?
UP has gone to court, and there's a stay given long time, because in these cases the final orders are not passed, so it's not easy for us to go to Supreme Court.
So, you're essentially suggesting that this whole issue of smoothening traffic of electricity is now subject to scrutiny by many high courts.
Well, it is
In some sense, it is, because if as long as the high court is pending there, will it be difficult to discipline these states, according to you?
no. What happens is that under the electricity law, there is a very clear provision, and this was again based on the Supreme Court order in the famous Calcutta case. When the Electricity Regulatory Commission Act came, they observed that this electricity is a highly techno-commercial business, and so high courts and Supreme Courts will always find it difficult. So you need to.
They don't have the expertise to understand what's going on.
That's why they had suggested that there should be an appellate tribunal against the orders of the Regulatory Commission, and that's why we have got a appellate tribunal, which has both judicial and technical members. But under the broader powers of the High Court, original jurisdiction, you can always challenge the virus of anything. And it can go on. And I can understand any judge would not like to have electricity shut off. So if the argument is made that if such a thing happens, then we will not get electricity. So that's why we have got these problems.
But do you think, Mr. Deo, is this kind of degenerating into some kind of a center state, some federal tension? Because I also heard that the part of the problem also is that the state load dispatch center is not autonomous of the state government. So, they merely follow the orders of the state government. So, one suggestion is that they need to be made autonomous so that they coordinate well with the regional load dispatch center, which comes under your jurisdiction, so that the electricity traffic is properly controlled and monitored. Now, is there a disconnect there, that the state load dispatch center listens to the state chief minister and national load dispatch center listens to the center? Are there issues?
Well, there are issues, because after all, state utilities deal with the consumer. So what it means is, when you are told don't overdraw and your demand is there, what it means is that you will have to go for load shedding. You have to switch off supply. If you don't get that problem at the regional load dispatch center, regional dispatch centers deals with a much broader this thing, can do that. Now, because of that, the in charge of the state load dispatch center, he is really caught in the cleft. On one side is the political bosses telling him, and this is what happened when we had a hearing immediately after that last week, when we had called the in charge of all the state load dispatch centers and asked them why they did not obey the orders of the regional load dispatch center. They produced SMSs and saying that district magistrate had ordered that there should be no load shedding in my district.
Okay, so the state bosses were giving them orders.
And Otherwise, if they were to go load shedding, they will also face the public fury. So on one side they say we are chief minister, on the other side we have the mob. So what do we do? So one of them suggested, please post one representative from regional load dispatch center. So that means then he can be held hostage. So anyway, that's being the case. So no, what really ails the sector is that electricity is still not realized it is a commercial commodity. It is no more a public good. It is for the state. If they want to give free electricity or cheaper electricity, they can do it. But it can't be at the expense of the utility.
The state has to provide subsidy from their balance sheet. But tell me, what do you make of this very drastic solution which the minister has spoken of, that if the state which overdraws and breaks that discipline, the chief secretary could go to jail? What is this new dramatic announcement about?
This is something what when I briefed the minister that what we have been doing, because we found that under the law we can impose a penalty of 1 lakh for each transgression of our regulation. Grid code is a regulation. So if there are say 100 such transgression by one state, the fine will be about 1 crore. Now if you look at the budget of these utilities, it runs into thousands of crores. So that 1 crore is not a really.
It's not a deterrent enough.
So what we started doing, we started making either the chief executive or the in charge responsible, personally responsible.
Is it a criminal this thing?
No, there is another provision under which you can lodge a criminal complaint.
Okay, there is a provision.
Provision under 146.
Electricity Act.
Electricity Act. And 142 is where commissions have these powers, which is like the contempt of court. But then we found that if you do it on an individual and say that this should be recovered from his personal salary, and if he belongs to some organized service like All India Service, which is the best thing, because then this can be recorded in his confidential report. So that really has a deterrent effect. So that's why I think the minister also realized, why not make the chief secretary who's in charge responsible?
Yeah, we'll just come back after a small break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with Mr. Pramod Deo, Chairman of the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. We were you were talking about now post the experience of the big grid collapse, really putting in place systems, accountability systems, making people accountable, as you said. The minister has spoken of making the chief secretary responsible. Now going a little deeper into the causes, besides the grid management question which you spoke about in detail, is there also this big question about the quantum of supply of electricity? Now, do you think that this is happening because at peak, during peak hours, we don't have peaking capacity? Is that one of the big issues in this?
Yes, it is one of the issues, because in the last 5 years, that 11th plan, we did add more than 55,000 megawatts.
Yeah, we are adding more, but it seems to be inadequate, right?
In fact, we had never added 55,000 megawatt, that kind of thing.
In any plan?
Adding only 25,000 is the maximum. But having added that, it created its own problem. One problem came on the fuel supply, coal, because the coal supply cannot cope up with this kind of capacity addition. On the other hand, having added this capacity, this electricity is being used again by the state distribution companies. They had to make payment. That means they had to have adequate money to pay for that. And that brings us to the issue.
Okay, the financial viability.
So you have to have a regular tariff revision, and that's what has not been happening.
How is tariff revision linked to this? The kind of mismanagement that happened?
If you look at the budget of any distribution company, distribution company's budget nearly 70% will be only power purchase cost.
Okay. Okay.
Now, to purchase that power, as long as you had the very simple relationship, you had your own state generating company buying.
Yeah.
But now you are buying also from the NTPC.
From Power Trading Corporation.
But now you are buying also from the private generators and also from the trading company.
So it's a mix of sources. Yeah.
Now you have to make payments. Some of the payments can be delayed. All the payments can't be. You have to also pay the railways. So all these. So that's why I think the power sector is described very well like our Indian marriage, where everybody is very unhappy.
Sure.
Partners can blame each other, and it is indissoluble. You can't get out of it. But as long as this relationship,
It's a slightly unhappy marriage which nobody can get out of.
see, but this was okay as long as everybody was from public sector. As soon as they bring in private sector, then that brings in the other issues. Because the private sector has raised money through financial institutions. That affects the health of the financial institutions.
So the health of State Electricity Board balance sheet, like what is the total losses now outstanding? It's in the region of some.
Well, the Shinglu committee had that time come
2 lakh
out with
crore or something.
Now 2 lakh crore is the losses they
Total
are
losses,
talking
right?
about.
No, tell me. So what do the State Electricity Boards do when they're not able to pay? When they're not able to earn enough from customers, or when they're running losses, what relationship does that have with their overdraw? That's what I'm trying to understand.
See, what happens is that you have a very clear choice that you are requiring say 100 units to buy to meet the requirement. You don't have money. You can pay only for 80 units. Now, having done that,
probably not even 80. Probably you can only pay for 50 units.
No, see, that's why you will find that the rural areas they're always neglected.
So then what happens? Yeah.
Then you find that you have under tremendous pressure that you must supply to the certain parts.
So okay, that's when overdraw happens.
That's why overdraw happens because you are not contracted. Because we have already issued directive given and we have asked for compliance. That you should have a complete plan. Then you have to go for load shedding.
So that means what you are essentially saying is, because I also read reports that many states, state electricity boards are not buying power from say Power Trading Corporation, private sources, because they feel that it's too expensive to buy. The more they buy, the more losses they'll tote up. So to limit the losses, they're not buying. So therefore, deliberately they are keeping power supply they're doing undersupply, and in that situation, when some urgent body like as you said, district magistrate or somebody says I need power, so then they start doing overdraw. Does something like that happen?
That's what will happen, because what you will try to do, you will try to see from where I can get.
Or some hospital needs power, for instance, they'll suddenly.
No, unfortunately, you can't really look at one customer or like a hospital. That is the unfortunate thing. Because unless those hospitals are on a separate line, feeder, it is not possible. Usually what happens, you will find that continuous process industries like your steel plant, cement plant, they are supplied on those express feeders. So the power supply to that has to be continuous. Similarly, railways, water supply, those are the essential facilities.
So coming to, now is this the solution? Because I am told that Gujarat has managed to segregate express feeders to agriculture, separate feeders for this, separate. Now is that a solution then? Then you drop your priority and say, okay, these sectors will have separate feeders, so that this sort of a thing doesn't happen, when you do overdraw and everywhere the power supply collapses. Is that one of the solutions?
The reason for that is that if you were to see the supply to agriculture is practically not metered.
It's not metered at all.
Although under the Electricity Act.
Then how is the regulator dealing with it? I mean, isn't this
it is always based on guess estimates, because even if the meters are fixed, meter readings are not taken. Because what?
But isn't it a violation of law? I mean, is it?
It is clear violation of law. So when new connections are given for agriculture, metering is compulsory. But if you have many previous customers who are not metered, they are being billed on the basis of their horsepower. Now you will find that 80% of the motors are supposed to be 3 horsepower. But you can get a motor stand for any horsepower.
Okay.
So you really don't know how much agriculture is consuming.
So this is a big mess.
This is a big
across
mess.
the board.
And then another problem comes is that you don't know what your losses are.
Okay.
Because you have got two parameters, variables. One is the losses, which you are not properly measuring. And on the other hand, you have supply to agriculture, which you are not measuring. So that's why it makes sense to have a separate feeder for agriculture. So you know exactly how much agriculture is consuming.
This Gujarat has tried this experiment.
Gujarat has done it very well.
Any other state is doing it? No.
Maharashtra is doing it, following it. Other states are also doing, Andhra. And another interesting factor which is important is that supply to agriculture is never given for 24/7. They don't need it.
They don't need it, yeah.
So
sure.
there is an element of load management.
Load management.
You supply it for 7-8 hours.
So you at least you segregate that completely.
Segregate that. And also in the rural areas, after all, why you need electricity? To improve quality of life, improve economic productivity. Now when you were linked to the agriculture supply, your supply for your commercial activities like dairy and poultry also gets affected. But now you have a separate line. Then as for the villagers, they will also get lights when they need it.
So you're saying, essentially you're saying that the big lesson from this whole episode is that we should look at all these rationalization, simple commonsensical rationalization measures to prevent something like this happening again. Is that the final conclusion?
In fact, the message is very clear. It is a chain. You are talking about generation, transmission, goes to distribution, and in the distribution finally it goes to how to meet your consumers' requirement and also the quality of supply. And if you have to do that, the real focus has to be on the consumer. And that's what the role the distribution companies have to play. And the state regulators have to see. Because all the state regulatory commissions have also fixed the standards of performance.
Okay. So you're saying that finally this marriage between public sector and private players need to become a little happier going forward. Yeah. Thanks a lot for talking to us. That's all we have in this episode of State of the Economy. We'll be back soon. Thank you.